Welcome back. My name is Matt. This is Hidden Light. And the most common question, aside from how big can I possibly make your photo, we did a video about that, that I get is, will this look good in platinum? Now, platinum costs like 3 to 10 times more than a standard print of any other variety. And so my answer was always yes, it will look good in platinum. Of course it will. I would love to take your money. But in reality, let's make a video today where we talk about some of the things that platinum excels at, some of the places where it's traditionally a little weaker or is less chosen for certain image types, and then we'll go look at a few things and talk about why each image was done the way that it was done, aside from the obvious fact. Number one on the list, archivability. Platinum Palladium is an extremely stable process. Like, gonna be here past civilization, kind of stable. Thousands of years, kind of stable. Which is far more than we expect from pretty much any other print type. So that is one consideration where people will typically choose platinum because they know it's an investment, they know they want this to be around, and they know they want it to be rare. Those three things are, honest to goodness, some of the reasons some people choose platinum full stop. But as a visual artist, you should also be concerned with what the process does to the image, how it affects the look. And so let's talk about that. One, warmth. So if your image does not look good in a warm tone, you may struggle to make it look good in platinum. For instance, I don't know, a photograph of an iceberg maybe doesn't belong in platinum because an iceberg is cool and it's a cool setting, and maybe you would want a cooler toned print. So the warmth is a thing. The other thing that's traditionally been a problem with platinum is contrast. Matte finish prints typically don't have as much contrast. The blacks aren't as deep. They're a little lighter, they're a little less. If you talk about Dmax, which is how printmakers talk about black, the depth of the black, the larger the number, the deeper the black. So you can get a Dmax of 2 point something in silver gelatin or inkjet. Or in platinum, you can get a Dmax around like 1.4, 1.5, 1.6 if you're really pushing it. So it's just not as black, which means if your image depends on a crushing, deep black with very little detail, just depth, platinum's probably not the process for you. At least that's historically been the case. I've recently been experimenting and succeeding with making glossy platinum prints, which gives me a glossy level of black, at the very least satin, which gives me a Dmax of 1.7, 1.8 instead of 1.5, 1.6, which is awesome. I'm not going to tell you how I do that because it's a secret, but it looks really cool, and I can show you a side-by-side of what that looks like, so remind me about that later and we'll do that. Warmth, contrast / black are the two main concerns. So when you send me an image and you say, how big can you make this in platinum? I will typically say I can make it up to 4 feet by 8 feet. It will look great in platinum. However, because the entire image is just raw black, like if you're looking at like Matthew Draper's work, for instance, he's an incredible photographer and he shoots underwater and converts everything to black and white, and he typically will take his water tone to a very deep black. It just doesn't work. I had the opportunity to print some images for another guy, David Duchemin. Hi, not that he watches this channel. And you just couldn't get there. We tried, but if the black won't go, then it's not going to look the way that you want it to. That being said, there is a sort of ethereal timelessness when you get this transition, this shift to a lower contrast, warmer print. It's not quite sepia, but it's got that sort of same vibes, and that's typically where if you want your image to look timeless, you can't tell whether it was shot yesterday or 150 years ago, that's something that platinum really excels at. Contrast that to silver gelatin, which typically has that crisper, cleaner, higher contrast, much more modern look. if that's what you're looking for and you need a deep black, then silver gelatin's obviously a no-brainer solution. And of course, we can tone silver to warm or to cool or to do kind of whatever we want. And we're happy to do that. And we still make them by hand. Not with big, scary laser machines, but like with our hands and an enlarger. You know what I mean? This is all well and good to talk about, but let's go look at some examples, because that is the easiest way to figure out exactly what you're looking at and what works well in which way. Let's go check them out. So, for our first example, this image is titled Who's Clapping? It's by a photographer named David Brookover. Stunning work, shot on 8x10 transparency film in Japan, and drum scanned, then printed in pure Palladium on a handmade Japanese paper. The reason, or one of the reasons, that Mr. Brookover likes to go with a paper like this is because it actually gets a better Dmax, that is to say deeper black, than many standard matte finish papers. It's got like a semi-glossy quality to it. Now we can't make them very big, and it's a real pain in the ass to work with. So we don't do as much of this as we used to, because sometimes bigger is bigger. But we've got the warmth here because we're heating the developer for this print. And you're actually getting a reasonable black. Like if you look at some of the border here, it's a pretty deep black. Same thing with some of these shadows, like especially in here. We're maintaining a pretty reasonable black. So he's getting kind of the best of both worlds. He gets that timeless ideal. He gets a reasonable amount of contrast. I mean, the highlights aren't really highlights because they're so brown or yellow or warm. And then there's also this wrinkle in the paper, which gives the sort of watery texture to the whole print, which is really cool. I don't print on this paper very much, and for many reasons don't recommend it for you to print on unless you really feel like suffering through it, because it can be a real pain to use. But really incredible work, and a reasonable split of the difference. Contrasting the platinum palladium with silver gelatin. This is an image by photographer David Budnick, who shot this at JFK's funeral, 1963, as a panorama. There's a whole story behind this image. It's really cool. But it's a silver gelatin print, and you can just tell, just instantly, by looking at it, that is a way deeper black than you're going to get, and that is a way whiter white than you're going to get in platinum. Now, we can get whites in platinum, but if you want detail, they get warmer and warmer and warmer typically as you get more and more detail, because you're getting them darker and darker. But here you have this incredible, just snap, really good contrast between the two, black and white, between all of the various tones in between. You're getting a Dmax that's way lower, 2 point something, and a nice bright white highlight. It's crisper, it's cleaner, it's slightly more modern, slightly less timeless. It doesn't have that like really old look to it. It doesn't have a Western feel to it, which is very appropriate because it's not particularly Western. So yeah, different images look differently in different ways. More examples. I gotta talk about the big platinum. I have to. This monstrosity is my 40 by 80 or 90. I forget how big it is. It's really big. Platinum palladium print. I think it is platinum palladium. I don't remember if it was pure palladium or platinum palladium. I think I've got a little bit of platinum in it. And this is really more the tone you sort of expect to see from platinum. I developed it at room temperature, so it's not that warm. And I haven't glossed it at all, so it is the standard matte paper reflection from Archability, or in this case, it's actually Hahnemühle, because this was before Arch was making the really big rolls that you could buy. So you've got some reasonably deep darks, but it's nothing crazy. It's not crushing black. It's nowhere near as black as the frame, which itself is only a deep brown. So you can really get a sense of the lower contrast, more ethereal, and it works well for this image because it's sunset and there's really no deep blacks. I'm not going for high contrast. I'm going for a softer, more mellow, more like relaxing with a glass of wine sort of vibe than like, look at how contrasty this is. And the warmth gives you some of that timeless aspect, and the fact that there's no homes and that there's no cars and there's really very little to place this in time. It could have been shot a gazillion years ago, or it could have been shot today. So, yes. This image is part of a series shot by a photographer named Jerry Jacka. He shot these when he was doing a bunch of work for Arizona Highways, which is an astonishing photo magazine. This is silver gelatin to the maximum. This is the epitome of silver gelatin. It is made from an original 4x5 negative, and due to Jerry Jacka's preferences, apparently we spiked the developer, so it's not the standard concentration, which gives you a little bit more snap. It's also been selenium toned. Now, we did a video about selenium toning that really we need to color grade again and re-release because you can hardly tell the difference. But basically, selenium toning converts the metallic silver into something that's not that, so it won't tarnish over time. So +1 for longevity. It also gives you a little bit better micro contrast. It gives you a little bit better black. So even better than standard silver, you get slightly better black, deeper black. And it shifts the tone. You can choose how much to shift the tone depending on what direction you're going, how much you really want. You can get a selenium tone to like a purple, which I think looks terrible, but there is like a medium ground. These were toned basically only for archivability, so not a particularly concentrated selenium, just enough to do the job of the conversion and give us a little snap in the blacks. But the blacks in this print are insane. They're very dark, and the contrast between those very deep blacks, which are everywhere, and the brighter textures in some of the rocks really gets the job done. Last, and certainly least, we have Inkjet. I don't really bother talking about Inkjet because generally speaking, it has a very similar Dmax and contrast range to silver gelatin, and it also looks basically like the screen. If anything, actually, blacks are deeper in silver gelatin and Inkjet than they are on your screen because they aren't backlit. This is just a standard Inkjet with standard full color inks, nothing fancy. I did use the black and white mode on the Epson printer, but like whatever. The blacks get pretty damn black. And the whites stay nice and neutral when you're not ordering these prints from Walgreens. They look like they're supposed to look when you order them from a real lab. I can, of course, tone this any direction. I can increase or decrease the contrast. Like, it's definitely the most versatile method of printing black and white prints. We don't really know, I don't really know how long they will last. I typically expect people to say somewhere between 100 and 200 years if they're displayed well. Cool. When I make an inkjet print, I'm sort of not worried about how long it will last because I can just make another one because you've got the files and the printer technology isn't changing very drastically. So you just, like if you screw one up or it dies or whatever, you make a new one. So we will limit editions of platinums and silvers, and for inkjets, you kind of don't really worry about it. This one's one of mine from Zion in Hiking the Narrows a while ago. Ooh, no, one thing I do want to talk about. One thing I do want to mention for inkjets, which used to be very common and is less and less common now. You can almost always, or you used to almost always be able to spot an inkjet because there's a difference in texture between raw white and any part of the image that's been covered in ink. This printer that I'm using does not use a gloss overlay or gloss optimizer, which means that there's a different texture between white and every other tone in the image. You don't get that in silver gelatin or platinum or albumin or actually any other print type, but you do get it in older inkjets where you don't have that gloss overlay. I know that some modern brand new inkjet printers will do a gloss overlay that defeats that. You no longer see the difference, but you can definitely see it in the raw white up here of the sun flare. This one is a bonus. This is an original albumin print from the early 1900s, late 1800s from Muybridge. And when we're talking about archivability, this is one of the things I want to talk about. This print is not particularly stable, despite having been framed in full museum everything, at least as far as I've owned it, right? Because it's a very old print. But if you look in this top corner, you can see shenanigans where the albumin base has started to do strange things when mixed with chemistry, air, and light. It's normal for that to happen, and the way that this print looks is because of the way that it was made. He shot mammoth glass plates for this series and then made incredible albumin prints, or had them made. Absolutely stunning work. But when we're talking about archivability, this print is not holding together as well as maybe you would like it to. Certainly if it was part of your permanent collection, it's an interesting story, and it's an interesting way to talk about albumin prints and what happens and where they come from, and etc. and so forth. But the platinum palladium process is similarly old and significantly more stable. So, really, the moral of the story is, yes, I can show you what looks good where and what types of images are typically used for, but it all comes down to your aesthetic and archival preferences. Rather than asking me if your image will look good in platinum, because my answer is almost always yes, I encourage you to download some of the soft proof profiles that we've got at the link down below. Check those out, install them in your Lightroom or Photoshop or both, and just apply them to your images and see what looks good, what looks slightly less good with those blacks lifted and everything warmed up a little bit. That will give you a great idea of, yeah, this could still work, or like, no, I hate this. Rather than asking me questions, you could just answer them for yourselves. Or you can ask me. Shoot me an email, and I'll be happy to tell you your image will look great in platinum. See you next time.